Look at this diagram carefully. Arterial blood glucose, when there is a reduction in the arterial blood glucose or when there is an increase in the arterial blood glucose, the pancreas is informed and the brain is informed. Let us consider a scenario where the blood glucose is reduced. Immediately the pancreas knows that there is no blood glucose, so much so insulin is suppressed and glucagon is released. Insulin, when it is suppressed, it conserves the utilization of glucose and keeps the blood glucose up. When the glucagon is released, it acts on the liver and produces glucose from glycogenolysis, or the storage form of glucose is broken down and glucose production is increased and glucose availability is increased. Likewise, the low blood glucose is informed to the brain, and once the brain knows that the blood glucose is low, it releases several neuromediators. Particularly sympathoadrenal outflow is increased, and sympathoadrenal outflow acts on the adrenal medulla to increase the epinephrine. It acts on the sympathetic postganglionic neurons, and the sympathetic postganglionic neurons produce norepinephrine and acetylcholine. So these two neurotransmitters along with epinephrine, that is epinephrine, norepinephrine and acetylcholine, they produce the symptoms of hypoglycemia or the adrenergic and cholinergic symptoms of hypoglycemia. Immediately one will be urged to ingest carbohydrate or food, which again maintains the arterial glucose. Also, epinephrine acts on the kidneys, acts on the liver, and when these neurohormones are available in excess, they increase the gluconeogenic precursors like lactate, amino acids and glycerol, and these will be coming from the muscle and the fat and of course the kidney, and all these precursors are pushed into the liver. Liver produces more glucose, so much of the glucose is maintained. So the other accessory pathway for that is the brain, the pituitary is stimulated, pituitary produces growth hormone, excess of growth hormone conserves glucose again, or it releases ACTH. The ACTH is adrenocorticotrophic hormone, which acts on the adrenal cortex here. Here, this is the sympathadrenal outflow through the adrenal medulla, and the ACTH through the adrenal cortex produces excess cortisol. So growth hormone, excess cortisol will also contribute for maintaining the arterial glucose. So much so, whenever there is hypoglycemia, the things that come into play are: the first defense will be insulin, the second defense will be increase in the glucagon, first defense is reduction in the insulin, second defense is increase in the glucagon, the third defense is the sympathoadrenal outflow, the accessory defense is through the growth hormone and the cortisol, and of course the symptoms are making us eat glucose from external source. These are the ways in which glucose is maintained in the body. So let's say that we are in a fasting state. Fasting can be a short fast of around 4 hours, 5 hours, that's what we normally do between the meals. Overnight fast, prolonged fast. In the short fast, what happens is, body utilizes the free glucose that is available in the bloodstream to up to around 20%. The remaining 75% of the need is met by the breakdown of glycogen from the liver. Supposing we are on an overnight fast for doing some blood test or something, say night 8 o'clock to morning 8 o'clock, 12 hours, glycogen breakdown accounts for around 80% or 75% of the volume of the glucose maintenance in the blood, and 25% of the glucose in the blood comes from gluconeogenesis. So in the short fast, it is the free glucose, which is like the currency or cash in the hand, and glycogen, the bank withdrawal, and in the case of overnight fast, we have the bank withdrawal from glycogen, that is 75%, and then gluconeogenesis, that is from the fixed assets like the proteins and the fat are burnt down and then to produce glucose. Supposing one were on a prolonged fast, like a willful fast or fasting because of non-availability of food, only 10 grams or less of liver glycogen remains and all the glycogen is spent out. Gluconeogenesis becomes the only source of glucose at the time. There will be muscle wasting, there will be adipose tissue breakdown, and muscle protein is degraded for amino acids. Lipolysis generates ketones which act as an additional fuel. Ketones by themselves can yield energy other than glucose. That's how the body tries to maintain the glucose in spite of fasting. But sooner or later, these counter-regulatory mechanisms fail and one need to get the actual intake of food, and that is how one cannot survive fasting for a little longer than 3 or 4 days. That's most important for us to understand, that we require continuous supply of fuel, the carbohydrates or any food for that matter. So, to summarize, whenever there is high glucose, it is toxic to the cells. Advanced glycation products. These advanced glycation end products are very toxic to the cells, and the glucose transporter is informed about the high levels of blood glucose. Beta cells of the pancreas come into picture. The effector hormone is insulin, and this insulin increases the glucose uptake by the muscle and fat tissue and thus lowers the blood glucose and prevents the accumulation of AGP. This is what happens in diabetes. In diabetes, this effector hormone is not functioning properly, either it is deficient or it is not effective. That is insulin resistance, so much so glucose uptake is reduced and then blood glucose remains higher and AGP will produce the toxicity to the cells. But normally in a non-diabetic person, the insulin takes care of it and prevents the surges in the blood glucose. Whereas when the blood glucose is very low, energy needs are not met, immediately the body is informed, glucose transporters know that there is a little of glucose there, alpha cells of the pancreas are stimulated, glucagon, the counter-regulatory hormone to insulin, is the most important one released from the pancreas, and this stimulates the breakdown of glucose in the liver, glycogen in the liver to glucose and raises the blood glucose. So these are the immediate defenses for high blood sugar and low blood sugar, which are like two sides of the same of a balance, and if this balance is critically maintained nicely with the input of insulin and glucagon being matched to the needs of the blood sugar, so much so the blood sugar is kept within a narrow range, as we have already